Boker Tov L'Kulam, Chaverim, Talmidei Chachamim. Okay, so this one, totally different tack to what, subject to what we did yesterday, the day before. It's a negative commandment not to cheat another in buying and selling. This is very appropriate to all of us, okay? It says, and if you sell something or buy from your fellow's hand, you shall not wrong one another. And that's from Vayikra. Whether a person cheated deliberately or he did not know that there was an overcharge in the sale, he is duty bound to make compensation. So even if it was an innocent oversight, we have to make restitution. There was a guy, I don't know if you remember Friends Bakery, Damon. You remember that where it used to be in Long Avenue? Before it moved to Sandringham or whatever, the restaurant that they had that closed down. So the owner that passed away. I knew his daughter. He never when he weighed stuff like bread and pastries and that, he never included the weight of the of the container. So not to charge people for that. It's in terms of being scrupulously honest and not cheat. Some people go to the nth degree, not to overcharge, even to the gram. So he was very well known for this noble act. Okay, because the way we have to be careful, and you have to be honest. And it's otherwise, if you do it, and let's say you do, you say, I overcharged him. I've got something else to tell you about this. I overcharged him. It's not a problem. He's not going to know. The point is, you're supposed to charge him what was due to be charged to him, not a few rand. Yeah, I told somebody when I was at my previous position before I came on Aliyah. I was obviously in sales there. So I was an account manager, and there was a Jewish chick that used to work there. You don't know who it is, and she said to the boss, let me just charge the extra 300 rand. So I said to her, it's not the price. You don't do that. It's not honest. And she didn't like it. And she didn't, and I hope she didn't do it. But she didn't like me telling her that. Can't just add on so you can get extra com. It's cheating. It's overcharging. It's not ethical. It's not good for the company. I said, you're thinking very short-sighted here. End of the day, you charge what the price is. And if you overcharge, you refund the people.
I agree with you. It's absolutely theft. And she didn't understand it was theft?
She thought she was clever, trying to overcharge. But she didn't like it when I pointed it out to her.
A Jewish woman?
Yeah.
I guess we all struggle with different things.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is that we look at somebody and we think maybe they're a bad person, but like we all have issues we struggle with. It's amazing that everybody's neshama comes to this world with a different struggle.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do because I've got a lot of different things that I need to work on. How do you get them all right? I don't know. But I can tell you something that theft is hectic. I don't know. I don't get it. And the thing I don't understand is, Kevin, when you've got from people that steal, and I've had a few, I just don't understand whether they think Hashem isn't watching, or do they think it's okay.
I know. That doesn't make sense to me.
That doesn't make sense. I
understand. They look the part, eh? They look the part, eh?
They look very choshev. It's part of their fraud con merchant gear. But they actually, like, I don't know, maybe they struggle with that. And
it could be. Exactly. It's a struggle. It's
Yeah, but they're struggling with my money. Now I'm struggling because they've got it. So 28A2, all these principal cases is when Rav Nachman says whether or not you would prevent a loss, or there's no loss incurred in the interim by the time you find a appointed agent, you are entitled to take the law into your own hands, providing that you would win the case in a court of law. Rav Yehuda basically says that you are not allowed to do that, only in a case where you would sustain a loss by trying to go through the legal process is it problematic? Both agree then that if there's a loss that would occur and between the current event and taking it to court, that you may take action for yourself. But the proviso is always if you would win the case. Why? Because the other party might take you to court. That was the first principle. And you have to be able to defend the action that you fitted your response within the criteria of the law, which is twofold. A, that you were legally within your right to do so because that person was infringing on your rights. And number two, you took the path of least violence or least extreme behavior, and that there could be a record almost of escalation of you asking the guy, you begging the guy, you shoving the guy, you spading the guy. Okay, so it goes from mild to a little bit more extreme. Now, what we're doing now is we're seeing another proof. We had no clarity before because, with regards to the nitsa, it could be proven either way. Either there could be a loss, either there could be a loss where the slave in the interim would steal from you because the relationship went sour, or there would not be a loss because he was quite happy not to rock the boat and he'd come back to his Canaanite wife and children. So it can't be proven from that case. Okay. So now we're getting to a case um, and talking about back to our Mishnah with regards to the barrels. So it says, come learn a proof from our Mishnah. If one places a pitcher in the public domain and another person comes along and stumbles over it and breaks it, the pedestrian, is not liable to pay for it. Okay. So when you specify that the pedestrian actually stumbled, the Mishnah then implies that the reason he's not liable to pay for it is that he broke the pitcher accidentally. He stumbled over it. Why? Because he never saw it. So it does leave an inference. What is that inference, guys? Can anybody? In other words, if I say I'm not liable because I stumble over your pitcher, you left it in the way and I broke it, therefore I'm not liable to pay. What's the converse then? It means that if I broke
it
deliberately, I
then you
would
would
have
be
to pay.
liable.
Correct. Kiv is totally correct. Then I would have to pay. So that is difficult because we've got different explanations. We've got one from Rav and one from Shmuel. So Rav explained that this mission is actually speaking of a case where the entire public domain was filled with pitchers, and therefore it's the public's right of way to be able to move. And if that's illegally blocked, the public themselves can take the opportunity to smash the barrels, and they can enforce their right of way. So what we're saying here is, in that particular way, it doesn't make 100% sense, because how do you stumble over something that, according to Rav's opinion, that there's enough of them prolifically that you wouldn't fall over, and B, that is in your right as one of the members of the public to clear a path for the public. Remember, you don't have to stack it up, because anything that requires more exertion when your rights are being curtailed, you don't have to do. When we learned a case of your ox was under another ox, it's just as easy to pull your ox out as to push the other one over. Here, we're saying that to spend time stacking the barrels is a loss of time for you, and therefore that would cost you money. So you can smash it out the way, because the person has almost given up their ability to control what happens to their barrels if they leave it in the public domain. Which means if you leave your wallet at Bromfontein train station, I think it could be a reasonable assumption you're not going to get it back. All right. So the Gemara deflects the proof. So it seems a contradiction, because the Mishnah doesn't permit the pedestrian to enforce his right by breaking the barrels. And then Rav seems to say that if there's pitchers all over the place, or pitchers or barrels, remember we used the interchangeable word, that in fact the public can clear it. So it seems to be a conflict between the Mishnah and Rav. So Rav Zaved said, in the name of Rav, he's adding a little bit of clarity to this. The same law, in other words, the pedestrian is not liable, possibly applies even when he broke the pitcher deliberately. And the reason that the Mishnah states a case in which the pedestrian stumbled is as follows. Since there's okay, so guys, the Tana wanted to state two principles. In the latter part of the Mishnah, it states if the pedestrian was damaged by the pitcher, the owner of the pitcher is liable to compensate him for his damage. So the first part is when it's talking about that if the cyclist, let's call it a cyclist, because the cyclist would probably be going fast enough, A, not to see the barrels when he turns a corner, or B, enough to have his force smash into the barrels and break the barrels of the pitcher. At the pace that I walk, I'm not going to do anything other than bump it, believe me. But Kevin's running perhaps would. So in that particular case, that's talking about the first part of the brisa, that the pedestrian or the cyclist doesn't have a responsibility to pay for what was broken. The second part of the brisa talks about something different. It's the pitcher or barrel owner's responsibility to pay for the physical injury sustained by him leaving a pitcher or barrel in the public domain. So in order to reconcile both of them, it has to, Rav actually comes with a sort of solution. So since the Tana wishes to state in the latter part of the Mishnah, and if the pedestrian was damaged by the pitcher, the owner of the pitcher is liable to compensate him for physical damage, which applies only where the pedestrian stumbled. But obviously, it doesn't apply where he broke the pitcher deliberately, because in that case, he damaged himself. So the Tana states in the first part of the Mishnah that the pedestrian stumbled, so no proof can be derived from the Mishnah as to whether one can enforce the law for himself. So what it's saying is as follows, is that when Rav brings this particular case, he's using a situation where he wants to explain, this is what Rav Zaved said to Rava. Rav wanted to explain where both parts of the Mishnah work in congruous sequence. Does that make sense? So the first part, he's busy cycling with his electric bike. Second thing of it is it's slightly dark, or he turns a corner and he smashes into it. And in that case, he goes head over heels. He breaks the barrel. Principle number one, he doesn't pay for it because this guy left a pit in the public domain, so to speak. Second thing of it is the person that left this obstruction has to pay for the medical bills. So Rav basically said it flows in that particular way. If you remember that Shmuel's opinion is that it had to have gotten dark. Why? Because in the clear light of day, you can see a barrel or a pitcher there. And then Rav Yehuda said it's you turning a corner and suddenly there's an obstruction that you don't see because it's out of your peripheral vision. But there were cases where we said that Shmuel and Rav Yehuda pay in circumstances where it's during the day also. But they have to be really extenuating circumstances. So we're saying this doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove the case of Rav Nachman that you can just simply smash things for your benefit. And it doesn't prove necessarily Rav Yehuda, because in this case, the person did sustain a loss, he injured himself. But all that we are trying to determine here is that if you actually injured yourself by gleefully smashing the obstruction barrels, you can't be expected to, if you were a bit of an idiot with a cricket bat and a shard of wood came and injured you, you can't expect that when you took the action of damaging somebody else's barrels and you never stumbled over them, that the other guy is going to pay you the medical bills. That's what you call chutzpah. You're destroying his property with glee, even though you're legally entitled to it, but you get injured by one of the shards and expect him to pay for it. That's the heart of chutzpah.
It sounds like he's getting a bit carried away with the exercise.
Yeah. So, Kiva, did you have a question? You're looking a little bit queried.
No, it's okay. I'm following.
Are you? Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. All right, so let's go on to the next part.
So Damon, sorry, before you proceed.
Yeah.
If somebody smashes the pitcher and he deliberately, then he injures himself. He's saying he's trying to claim damages.
Yeah, that's the heart of chutzpah.
Of course, it's his problem.
Correct. As it is, even if you've got a right to clear a pathway in the public, You should always be aware that somebody here could lose money. I'm not saying the Gemara. There's a difference between the spirit of the law and the what do you call it? The halachic parameters. So take Shabbos for example. When people start to keep Shabbos, it's quite difficult. So sometimes they leave a TV on. So if they leave a TV on, they're not breaking Shabbos. Why? Because they're not using electricity and turning it on and off. But it's not in the spirit of Shabbos. But it's a transitionary period until people that are secular keep Shabbos.
Yeah, I stopped last year, by the way. I used to do it.
Okay, but no lashon hora to yourself, Gav. This is what we've been learning.
Okay, but I thought everybody kind of knew. I was just reminding everybody. All right,
no. So
you didn't have to, Gavin. You didn't have to broadcast that to us.
Yeah, no, but I'm just trying to show that like it can happen to anybody. It didn't even happen for a year. It happened. I did it for about 5 years. It took me time.
It's okay.
I never touched the TV. I never did anything.
No, it's fine. I don't think that's negative, Damon.
Let's get back.
Carry on. My apologies.
Okay. So no, Gavin, it's a good point. So it's a transitionary point. Okay, so that people do that. So the spirit of the law here is that you don't gleefully smash somebody else's barrels or pitchers of wine and oil. It costs them money. What you do gently, if it doesn't exert you that much, is move them gently out of the way. If you're going to break your back, but you can still get past, walk past. You don't have to gleefully pick up a cricket bat and smash this thing to pieces. You certainly don't have to lift if you get injured by a shot because you're not exactly Gary Player with a golf club. Have to go have to go to the owner of the barrel and say, I want medical damages. I mean, that's the heart of arrogance, insensitivity, etc. So let's go into the next thing. I mean, it's pretty clear. So the Gemara attempts another proof. Come learn a proof from the following brisa. Scripture states concerning a woman who grabs the private parts of a man who is attacking her husband, and you shall cut off her hand. Obviously, this refers to a payment of money. As I said, one of the objections that I don't understand is why the Chumash is written literally, because you do have many fundamentalist Christians and Islamic groups that take the text literally, and it's no surprise in the middle of Islamabad why they chop off your hands. Because anybody that reads these texts literally, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is going to come off with the wrong meaning. So I'm not arguing with the rabbis. I'm not arguing Hashem had his reasons. I just wish I understood why you would write it literally if it has a different meaning. I understand Gavin once brought up a good point that the oral Torah is depths and depths of levels. But if you want to take stupid people like me and apply the law, you have to write it in a way that I can understand. The way that it would be nice if it was written is that if if two men were in a bar fight and a woman to protect her husband grabbed the opponent's privates to render him incapacitated, that she would have to pay financial compensation for humiliation. If it was written down literally, I think that to me would be easier to understand. I'm not criticizing the Torah, guys. I need to learn from Rabbi Cohen why it's put in such a way. I'm just saying over hundreds of years, many cultural sects and religious sects have adopted the Chumash literally, and it's created misery. But
I think that you must understand something, Damon. I'm going to give you an answer. It's not a great answer, but it is an answer that's worthy, I think, of just mentioning, is that Hashem has a master plan. So it's part of his master plan. And we just have to accept that. There's nothing we can read. I'm saying it's not a great answer, but it is a answer that helps a little bit.
Well, I agree with you. In other words, probably gave the concept of J.C. Penney to the Goyim because
he gave all of it to you. Everything.
No, well, I'm trying to explain why. It's because for order for them to understand a messianic concept when the real Mashiach does come, they would have to find out what a false messianic concept is. Why? Because sometimes before somebody gets married, they learn about relationships and giving and generosity with a girlfriend who won't tolerate his selfish ways. And by the time they're ready for their real spouse, the guys hopefully learned a lesson from experience. So sometimes there are cathartic experiences, but I need to speak to Rabbi Cohen in terms of why it's a literal base that can be completely misconstrued because it has created some problems. Right, let's get it back to the Gemara. But it's just something I wanted to mention to you guys. And you shall cut off her hand. This refers to payment of money. So although this woman acted to save her husband from being beaten, she's still liable to pay compensation for embarrassing his assailant. What did we learn about the laws of humiliation with regards to payment? Is that we're not talking about actual damage. Obviously, if she damages his private parts, there's actual damage. But this is if she doesn't damage it permanently, but the humiliation. So you pay for humiliation even when your intent is not to cause humiliation. This is the biblical source of a previous thing that we learned. Remember when the guy jumped, when he fell off a roof, he positioned himself so that the person below could cushion his fall. Now he fell accidentally, but because he positioned himself so he'd have a soft landing at the other person's expense, he then obviously pays because he had the presence of mind to reduce his level of pain at the other person's expense. So here, she doesn't want to embarrass this guy. She wants to make sure he can hardly breathe by grabbing his privates and hopefully relaxing on the husband because he's in agony. Okay? That being the case, her intention was to render the husband to be safe, not to embarrass him. So we learn here that you pay for humiliation even when your intention isn't to humiliate. That's the basis of the uh, of that particular law. But what we're
So,
saying here,
David,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but I think a good point is to know that one has to be clear in saving versus destroying. You got to be able to do an act to try and save someone, but not to actually damage them.
no, obviously, but in the heart of two men in a brawl in a bar fight, she's not gonna. She you don't have the. All you're trying to do. There's drama. There's punches being thrown. It's very difficult to measure a response when you're reacting in a state of absolute panic and your husband's being beaten. I agree with you completely, Akiva. It's just the reason these halachas are given out is because in an actual situation, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have seen a fight. It's very clumsy. A real fight is very, very clumsy. It's not like it is in the movies, whereas a scuffle, it ends up on the floor. And sometimes your actions aren't measured because your adrenaline is rushing. So you're completely correct. But you don't have the presence of mind when somebody you love is being beaten. You know what I'm saying? In fact, there could be a case where somebody's being beaten that you love, where you're going to pick up a brick or something and hit the other person in the head to stop them maybe hitting your father or beating you. Now, is that a measured response? No, but you love your father and you don't know if this guy will ever stop hurting your father in a car, if there was a car altercation or something like that. So you're completely correct. Unfortunately, we people get into situations like this. So it's exactly what the Gemara is saying. What Akiva is saying is that how do we know if you can apply that she's not responsible? Because he's clearly injured here. So although the woman acted to save her husband from being beaten, she's still liable to pay compensation for embarrassing his assailant. Now, does this law not apply even when she was unable to save her husband in any other way? So, what it's saying here is that if she is responsible for this, but she couldn't save her husband in any other way, we can see there that you are not allowed to take the law into your own hands, even if you would sustain a loss. So now this is going one step more stringent than Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda. Why is it more stringent? Because Rav Yehuda is saying if you would sustain a loss, you are entitled to take action. And even Rav Nachman agrees with it. So here it's saying, hang on, she had no other option. And in having no other option, is she's still liable for payment. Now, this is even more stringent than Rav Yehuda. Because Rav Yehuda is saying that she would sustain a loss because her husband is being beaten. So this is going even more stringent, right? So it said this proves a person may not enforce the law for himself even when he will otherwise suffer a loss. So that immediately that sentence is showing that it's more stringent than both Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda. Does that make sense, guys? Just before we go on, it's pretty self-explanatory. All right, this verse, by the way, is in Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 12. What the Gemara challenges this rebuttal, okay, it deflects the proof. No, the verse can be explained as referring to a case where she was able to save her husband in another way without embarrassing the attacker. So in that case, it goes back to Rav Yehuda, which implies that if that was the only way to save her husband and incur a loss of her husband being injured, she would be entitled to take that response. So it seems to have gone less stringent than the actual Gemara and gone back to Rav Yehuda. And when we say Rav Yehuda, we're saying obviously Rav Nachman agrees. They're both on the same page there. It's only when there's no loss. Yeah, because it's a loss. They both agree.
Yeah.
So the Gemara deflects this proof. Okay, but according to the explanation, if she was not able to save him in any other way, she would not be liable. What would the law be? She would not be liable. So, okay, so that makes sense. So what it's saying is here, it proves that Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda are correct, that if there was no other method, she wouldn't be liable for this damage, right? But there's a problem, because there's the last part of the brisa where this came from. And in the verse it says, and she stretches out her hand. And what happens is the ton of this brisa says, this serves to exclude an agent of the court from liability if he embarrasses someone. The Tana should have differentiated between liability and non-liability and taught this distinction with regard to the woman herself as follows. In what case does this ruling, the woman is liable, apply? It's asking a question. It applies where she was able to save her husband by other means, but if she was not able to save him by other means, is she not liable? So what it's saying is this, is that you've got a court agent. Now, a court agent is entitled to embarrass you, not for the sake of embarrassing you, but he's allowed a certain leniency. I'll give you an example. You owe somebody 20 grand and the sheriff of the court comes. Now, your wife and kids can be at home. Now, if he's a bit sensitive, he'd say to them, listen, I've come here, just tell them we're having a business meeting and you've sold me the furniture. I don't want to come here with 5 police officers and a couple of breakers to clean your furniture out, because the sheriff of the court has attached assets now. You owe money. And I don't want to traumatize your children by them seeing you as the deadbeat loser you are. So kindly ask your wife to take them to the park, and we will take the stuff and you will say you sold it for an excellent price. That's what the sheriff of the court does do. But the sheriff of the court does this 8 times or 10 times a day. And usually he's a heartless person, by the way. And what happens there is embarrasses somebody. Why? Because in the middle of the family and people see all this, what do you call it, official personnel come and rock up at your house and take out your furniture. It's very difficult to tell the neighbors you sold the furniture when people come as police officers. It's a bit difficult to say the police force bought your furniture. So therefore, the sheriff of the court is not entitled to, but he has a certain, what do you call it, legal allowance to do something that's embarrassing within being an appointee of the court. The same thing is if they come and arrest you at your office. That is very embarrassing. It could cost you your job, etc. But they're entitled to do that to stop an assailant from escaping. So that's what it's saying. So the ton of this brisa, by the very fact that he brings this case of a court appointee, is trying to show the difference between a court appointee that's allowed to embarrass somebody and a woman who is not allowed to embarrass somebody, even if she has no other means of protecting her husband. This is what the implication of it is, right? Otherwise, what's the proof of the Gemara? The Gemara is saying then it would have no reason to bring the example of the court appointee. It would seem so far. Why would it seem like this? Because then you don't have to bring it as a point of relevance. All you have to do is say that if there's no other way to protect her husband, she may enforce the law for herself, because otherwise she would suffer a loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And where's this brought by? Contresse Shiurim, chapter 15, verse 3, and Rav Gutzman brings it. He brings it from the Rosh. Okay, so that's the particular view that's put forward in this particular case. So now that's the question. The Gemara is not stating that that's why there's a court appointee in comparison, but it's saying that we might have thought that it brings this case of a court appointee to show the contrast between the woman that's not allowed to do it and the court appointee that is. Because you could have just taught that the woman can protect her husband if there's no other, what do you call it, anatomy she can grab to render the guy to lose concentration and smashing the husband. All right. So it says, in what case does this ruling apply? So it was asking a question. Would it not apply in a case where she could not save her husband by any other means? In other words, is she or is she not liable? So the Gemara responds, indeed, this is what the Tana is actually saying. The end of the brisa should read as follows. In what case does this ruling, the woman is liable, apply? It applies where she was able to save her husband by other means. So in other words, it's saying if there was another method, but she got panicky, then she has to pay either way. But if there was no other means to save him, her hand is assigned the status of an agent of the court, and she is not liable. So what does it mean she's not liable? Just like she's legally entitled to defend her husband, then she's seen as an agent of the court. And the Tana is saying he's not trying to show the contrast. In fact, he's trying to show that she is like a court-appointed agent, where she can have authority to do so in this case. All right, let's move on. We're making good progress, guys. So here we see it seems more like, so far, what do we see? This seems more like Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman, that only if she would sustain a loss, then she's entitled to do so. Are you with me? This so far seems the most strong argument for Rav Yehuda. Do you not agree, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She can take that action if it's going to lead
Only,
to a loss.
only if there's no.
Only, that's the only, yeah.
Which
No
implies
exceptions.
that in this case, it would seem the more according to Rav Yehuda than Rav Nachman, because otherwise she'd be liable for payment. Agreed, Akivs?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on. The Gemara attempts another proof. Why? So if it's clear, why is it attempting another proof? Because as the Rosh says, it seems to contrast this issue with the court agent initially to say that a court agent can do it, but she can't. So it's not totally conclusive. But it would seem the way the Gemara ended up playing out that it's more aligned to Rav Yehuda. But Rav Nachman does agree, except he said when there's no loss, he can take the law into his own hands. All right, so the Gemara attempts one last proof. Come learn a proof from the following Mishnah. If there was a public path passing through the midst of someone's field. In fact, let me just share my screen and show you where it is. I learned this when I was doing Torah learning for Ian Shapiro, Rabbi Ian Shapiro. I was learning the Mishnayos for Bava Basra. So thank you, Ian Shapiro. And I'd like Arthur to read this because he's prepared very well. Arthur, read this, Mishnah. Arthur, you're on mute.
Yeah, taking off. Okay. In the case of one who had a public thoroughfare passing through his field, and he appropriated it and instead gave the public an alternative thoroughfare on the one side of his property, the halacha is that the thoroughfare that he gave them, and they may use it. But the original thoroughfare that he took for himself has not reached him. Therefore, he cannot appropriate it for his personal use.
Correct. So what it's saying is that, listen, the guy in his own mind, he has a field. Now he's sick and tired of the public. He just bought a field going through his field. And what he decided to do is build a new pathway, right? So now that he builds a new pathway, what he gave them, and they can use it. And therefore, the original thoroughfare, he thought he'd block off now, and that he could keep it for himself so that they wouldn't basically go through his field. But it's saying here that he can't appropriate it for his own personal use. Does that make sense? So this was his scheme, and it didn't graft. Okay. So, all right. So now we're in 28a4. So now that we've learned that, it says, now if you say that a person may enforce the law for himself, let the owner take his staff and sit on the original path to hit whoever attempted to pass through, since the original path now belongs to him. That's what it's proposing. He should be allowed to prevent people from using it. The fact that the Mishnah rules that he may not do so proves that one may not enforce the law for himself, even when inaction will result in an irretrievable loss. So what are we talking about a loss here? The loss is the financial cost of him building an alternative pathway. That's the loss, not his time sitting there with the stick. The guy could enjoy it. He's demented. He likes the stick. He likes beating, whatever. It's his amusing hobby, whatever. That's not the loss. The loss is that he spent money on a new path with the intention of taking back the old path, and they can use the new path. Now he can't take back the new path. Now he's suffered a loss, and he can't keep the original path just for himself. So it's saying if he was allowed to take the law into his own hands for his to prevent a loss, he should be able to reclaim the old path. So this Gemara is very clever. First, it seems to prove in the previous case of a woman like Rav Yehuda, and now it's trying to prove that even if he would sustain a loss, it's trying to prove that you can't take the law into your own hands, which is more stringent than Rav Yehuda. Does that make sense, guys? So that's how we're seeing it so far. Now, this is interesting. The Gemara rejects this proof. Rav Zavid said in the name of Rava, the rabbis issued a decree against shifting a public path, lest one provide the public with a crooked path. Therefore, the owner may not prevent people from using the original path because it still belongs to the public. So just before we run out of time, in case we do, I just want to tell you the two definitions of a crooked path. The one definition that it's going to bring in the Gemara is the fact that a crooked path is deemed crooked as in literally crooked, meaning the path was long and wide, it was a government-sponsored walkway, and he went it on the cheap. What did he do? He put cobblestone where any woman in high heels would mangle her ankle, and get it caught in the cobblestone, and there's thorn thistles, and it's a dodgy path. It's a thin path. It's made not of even material. He what do you call it? He decided to cut financial corners and not spend money on a proper path. Okay, so that's the one definition of a path. It's inferior to the current path. That's version number one. The version number two is that it's a crooked path, meaning it's deemed out of the way. I'm just doing this in summary because we've got 3 minutes left. We're going to unpack this. What does it mean out of the way? Gavin and I are living in Johannesburg and Akiva. So say Akiva and I, he lives in, he lives near Yeshiva College, right? Now, and I live in Sydenham near Carisbrook. Now, there's a path that takes up to the shul, and previously it was the original path was closer to Akiva. Now the path is being moved where it's closer to me. Now Damon's happy. I'm as happy as anything because it's less of a schlep. But whenever you choose a different path, one party is going to be happy and one party is not going to be happy. Why is the one party not going to be happy? Because now it's physically further from them, and the other they almost accepted it because everybody used it in the public. So how much could they complain? They got used to it. Now when you're trying to make new things for them, etc., you're going to get some unhappy people, and that's referred to a crooked path. So let me just quickly read this. So Rav Zaved said in the name of Rava, the rabbis issued a decree against shifting a public path, lest one provide the public with a crooked path. Therefore, the owner may not prevent people from using the original path because it still belongs to the public. So basically, the halacha is assuming that people were going to go on the cheap that built their own path for the public. So therefore, they did a preventative halacha to prevent people from taking back the original path. So people can choose the path that they want to because they know human nature. So then we've got a different opinion. Rav Meshashia, who said that the Mishnah refers specifically to an instant where the owner provided the public with a crooked path. Now, when you read this at first, it seems, oh, it's saying the same thing. It's not. He's saying, listen, only when there is a physical crooked path does this law make
Yeah, perfect. Thank
That's
you.
good.
Very good stuff.
All right.
Right,
Super,
thanks,
guys. Lovely
Damon.
to see you. Pleasure, man.
All right.